بفضل الله بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الحمد لله والحمد حقه كما يستحقه حمدا كثيرا الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله اللهم لعن أول ظالم ظلم حق محمد وآل محمد وآخر تابع له على ذلك اللهم لعن العصابة التي جاهدت الحسين وشايعت وبايعت وتابعت على قتله اللهم لعنهم جميعا ثم الصلاة والسلام على خير خلق الله أجمعين محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين واللعنة الدائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين إلى قيام يوم الدين. When you stand before the shrine of Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullahi wa salamu alayh, we are familiar with the ziyarah. We say assalamu alayka wa ala dhaji'ayka Adam wa Nuh. So we say salam to the Imam and we say peace be upon you and upon those that are resting next to you, that lie in the grave with you, Adam and Nuh. You look at the state of where he lies and who is in his vicinity, and then you look at what takes place in Medina, and you say to yourself, this must be an atrocity. That where Amir al-Mu'mineen lies, salawatullah alayhi, next to the two of the holiest bodies that ever walked the earth, our Messenger Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam has been placed where he is buried next to him of two of those that harmed his daughter Fatima, as Sahih Bukhari says. And whoever harms her has harmed Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam. Whoever has harmed Rasulullah has harmed Allah. And then you think to yourself, how be it that they are buried there and everyone that was nearest to Rasulullah is buried in Jannatul Baqi, which is a desolate place at the moment and has been for a while. And this is why we're commemorating. Well, you commemorate here because a crime was committed in 1806. And then the Ottoman Empire rebuilt the actual, because the shrine was destroyed in 1806 and then they rebuilt it. Then in 1925 or 1926, it was destroyed again. So when it was destroyed, because the actual shrine that you see is not the original shrine. It was a shrine, the one you see in images, that was built by the Ottomans. There was one before. And then it was destroyed again in 1925 and 1926. The point that you sit and you think to yourself is, what was the objective of this? See, some of you might think it was a direct attack on the Imams. No, it was a direct attack on God. Because they were going to destroy the shrine of Rasulullah. You know this. When the Wahhabi entity first came in 1806, they were hell-bent on destroying everything. All the tombs, everything that existed, they wanted to destroy. Every athar of Islam. Why is that? Because the Wahhabi installation there was anti-religion. They were completely against religion, because if you look at the time, it wasn't only the Shia. Shia were always voiceless. Even the Sunnah prevented this. The Sunnah were voicing their concerns even about Al-Baqi, that it shouldn't have been destroyed. So this influence, as we know, was obviously, like all the problems we have, of the original the colonialists and the empire. They're the ones that wanted everything to be destroyed. Destroy everything that would have any evidence of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam, as they would sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad do this with those before them. But what the problem is, when I look at this, And I'd say to myself, I want to sit and convince people. I want to start explaining the importance of these shrines, rebuilding these shrines, and placing them the way that they were. You'll find, as an apologist or a defender of religion, you'll find that when it takes, when it concerns defending religion or defending any of the subjects, like visiting the graves, like the concept of temporary marriage, or like the concept of intercession, or any of these concepts of Islam that people deter from, or praying on the turba, before you can pursue attempting to teach someone the importance of this ritual, someone says, why do you pray with your hands by your side? Before I can try and convince someone as to why you pray with your hands by your side, or why do you pray on a turba, or why do I do all this, before I do this, I need to see whether they are a receptor of this. They are ready for this. We must begin with Islam and teaching the religion from the very beginning. And if they reject there, then so be it, without you pursuing any further. Can you tell him to? Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Firstly, we're going to look at what type of customers you're dealing with, what type of people you are dealing with when you bring them. And this is the origin of your problem. Because sometimes you're talking to people, and as we say in Arabic saying, La hayata liman tunadi. And we'll explain what that means. There's no life to the one that you are calling. Firstly, Allah Azza wa Jal has created human beings, placed them on this earth. There are those who have hearts that believe, there are those who disbelieve. When you're trying to convince a Wahhabi, you need to remember they have a deficiency within to begin with. First, I must try and fix that deficiency, and then the rest will follow through. See, if you attempt from the start to try and convince someone that I have to rebuild these graves afterward, they're not going to understand the concept. I need to make them understand what the religion is. However, I need to understand that Allah Azza wa Jal already mentions to His Prophet. He says to him, Innama. Remember what I told you what Innama is? I always repeat this so you know this. Innama means this and only this. Innama yastajibu alladhina yasma'un. The ones Allah Azza wa Jal says to His Prophet in the Quran, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, He says the ones that will answer, or alaykum salam wa rahmatullah, or the ones that will what? We'll say answer the call, the ones that will listen, the ones that will hear the ones that will respond to you. He says, alladhina yasma'un. Innama yastajibu alladhina yasma'un. The ones that hear. Allah, is He when you read something like this, do I sit there and think, hold on, Allah is talking about people that can hear? What does that mean? That's the majority of the population. What's the percentage of deaf people in the world? Is that what it's talking about? And then Allah Azza wa Jal says a term which leads us to understand something else. He says, وَالْمَوْتَ يَبْعَثُهُمُ اللَّهُ ثُمَّ إِلَيْهِ يُرْجَعُونَ. And then He says, but the dead. So He's giving you two categories. He says, those that hear, and then He says, and the dead. He says, the dead, Allah Azza wa Jal yab'athuhum, He will resurrect them, then to Him they will return. So let's begin from here. There are those that hear, and then there are the dead. We'll talk about what they mentioned throughout in the Quran. Allah mentions about these people in the Quran. He says, وَالَّذِينَ كَذَّبُوا بِآيَاتِنَا سُمٌّ وَبُكْمٌ فِي الظُّلُمَاتِ. So those that deny our verses or our signs are deaf and dumb within darkness. When we say dhulumat, it doesn't mean darkness. Dhulumat means darknesses. You know, it's a plural of darkness. Yani multiple darknesses. Okay. So then he says, من يشاء الله يضلله ومن يشاء يجعله على صراط مستقيم. Allah Azza wa Jal, whoever He wills, He leaves astray, and whoever He wills, He puts on a straight path. Does this actually mean, we go back to the Wahhabi rhetoric, does that actually mean that, you know, God says, you know, yeah, I like the cut of his jib, he looks good, yeah, I'll put him on the right path. Or this guy's got a bit of a limp, no, I'm going to put him on the left path. This guy's crawling, yeah, no good, put him on the left path. No, it's not the way it works. Allah Azza wa Jal says what? Who is it there that is a receptor? Allah Azza wa Jal is the one that looks for the one that prepares themselves, and we'll get to that. Then Allah Azza wa Jal mentions in the Quran, just to keep you an idea so people can understand, He says, قُلْ هَلْ يَسْتَوِي الْأَعْمَى وَالْبَصِيرُ أَفَلَا تَتَفَكَّرُونَ. Once again, Allah keeps mentioning A'ma. Before we talked about the deaf, now He says the what? The blind and the one that can see. He says, are they equal? And Allah says, do you not give this thought? Think about that. Are they the same? So in other words, Allah is mentioning to you, sometimes you're talking to all. Sometimes you're talking to someone and there is no result coming. So Allah then tells the messenger to give reminder to who? Who does He tell him to remind? Take a look. He says, وَأَنذِرْ بِهِ الَّذِينَ يَخَافُونَ أَن يُحْشَرُوا إِلَىٰ رَبِّهِمْ. Who do you warn, Ya Rasulullah? Sallallahu alayhi wa ala ahli baytika at-tayyibin at-tahirin. Who do you warn? Allah Azza wa Jal says, you warn who? The ones that fear that they'll be gathered to their Lord. The ones that fear this. They fear the day of judgment. You know, sometimes you warn someone, وَمَا خَصُّوا بِالدِّينِ مَا خَصُّوا بِالْآخِرَةِ. You say, they have no, when I say مَا خَصُّوا, they've got nothing to do with religion. They've got nothing to do with the hereafter. You tell them, come towards God. You know, when you tell someone, Salli, get up and pray, and he says, if Allah wants me to pray, He'll pick me up and get me to pray. You've heard those people. Yeah, I've got. So in other words, when I want to call someone, you need someone that has fear of the day of judgment. Allah Azza wa Jal says to the Prophet, these warnings aren't for the ones that are blind. They are not for the ones that are deaf. They are only for the ones that take heed to warning. The reason why we actually talk, here's the question. Why then do we talk? Why then do we tell the Wahhabi? Because we need to put the hujjah on them. The argument, the proof on the day of judgment, so they have no argument. If you take a look at one of the one of the channels on YouTube, it's actually very good because like, at the moment it's good, so it could change. You know, at the moment there's these channels for Dhul Fiqar al-Maghribi. It's a good channel at the moment. Before, if he deviates later, inshallah he doesn't. But I just say that it's a disclaimer in case, because you don't know what happens to people. But he brings conclusive arguments while being respectful. He's not one of those guys that brings arguments, you know the ones I'm talking about, that they slander the ulama, they slander other people. No. This guy brings conclusive arguments, and from what I see, it's someone that actually cares about the day of judgment, unlike the others that are just there for heroism and for people to recognize them. Now, he gives conclusive arguments. What for? Just for there to be an argument on them on the day of judgment. That you knew. You can't turn up on the day of judgment and say, oh, I didn't know. I don't know what's going on. And just like, you know, when you look at the state of Palestine today, a good thing for you to watch is you actually see what's happening. Then you watch, I was looking at an article in the Australian today, and I think I read 1/3 of it, and I was going to probably put my fist through the screen. You know, you just read it, and the guy is talking as if like every time they've never write Israel attacks Palestine. They always say they retaliated. You know, could you imagine I'll give you an idea. Could you imagine like a child was to get up and to throw an ash on you, and then you grabbed him and you pile drived him to the floor, and then they said, oh, you just retaliated to the guy, this little child put an ash on you, and that's all the news wrote about. No one talks about the pile driver. You know, this is the thing that you're seeing today. So it's obvious, it's evident that you can see the haqq from the batil. You can see there is oppression and people choose not to see this. So I need to put the evidence of there being this batil there. Now, Allah Azza wa Jal is telling you basically, these people, when you try to talk to them, if your intention is to change the way they think, you're wasting your time. If that's your intention, هلا بدي اهديه, no. ختم الله على قلوبهم وعلى سمعهم وعلى أبصارهم غشاوة. That Allah Azza wa Jal has put a seal upon their hearts and upon their hearing, okay? And upon their sight. They have a seal, they have a darkness that covers everything. Why? Because they've chosen not to hear, so Allah leaves them. Allah leaves them. If you look at the first few verses of Surah Al-Baqarah, explains what these people are. It tells you different examples. It tells you like the one that has set fire around them and then they have no guidance, they have nowhere to go. You know, they basically, that's what they've done. They put a wall of fire around them and made sure that there's no direction for them to go to. So you don't need to waste your time trying to convince the world. Your objective is to show your haqq. Amir al-Mu'mineen, salawatullahi wa salamu alayh, says, لا تقاولن إلا منصفا. In other words, do not waste your time. Only have discussion with who? With someone that's munsif. What does munsif? Someone that's fair. And then he says, وَلَا تُرْشِدَنَّ إِلَّا مُسْتَرْشِدًا. And do not try and guide or give advice to except someone that's a receptor of guidance. Why? How often do you get into a discussion or a dialogue with somebody that has no intention except what? To win the argument. How are you going to win against someone that intends on winning the argument? How do you intend? If someone intends, imagine I turn up, I'll put it this way. 2 football teams turn up and one team says to the other, look, we're much better than you on paper. Yeah, so you're going to have to let us win. You know, that's it, we're better than you on paper. You got no right to win this game. They won't say, they're there to play the game. They're there to play the game, they're there to win. In a debate, it's the same thing. I know, yes, your argument's more conclusive, your argument's more correct, but, you know, I've got to win this debate. And that's all you're entering. You're entering a debate where someone will overcome. The haqq is haqq. The truth is truth. And that's all you need to do, is put what the truth is and walk away. Don't sit there and try and convince them. You know, people say, I want to try and guide this, but you're not going to guide them. Why? This is what God has said about them. Because when you're advising someone that does not seek advice or guidance, it's like you're trying to feed the satiated. Someone's full, you're trying to feed them. They don't want to eat. They're full, they just don't want to eat. You're trying to give something to someone that doesn't need it. Imagine like giving something, that's it. They are set in their ways, as we say. That's why when you're trying to discuss the proof creation to an atheist, you're wasting your time in most cases. Or trying to prove the wilayah of Amir al-Mu'mineen with those that have chosen against him, you're also wasting your time. All you do are there to tell them what the case is and what they want, that's up to them. You're not going to change if they are set in their way. So, you need to understand why haven't the graves been built? Why haven't they rebuilt them? See, you need to understand the logic of these people you're dealing with. It is haram for you to build upon a grave. This is what they say. It is haram for you to label, it's haram for all of this. If you go to the grave of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, previously they never used to have the names. Now they've put, this is the burial of Abu Bakr, this is the burial of Umar. They've actually got them there now. So I asked the one of them, I said, isn't it haram to label the graves? Why have you labeled the graves? This is forbidden, this is against the sunnah. And he said, well, people are getting lost, so we have to tell them where it is. And I said, well, you know, when we go to Baqi, we don't know whose grave's who. Why don't you label them? He says, oh, the people that come here, they just worship the graves. So the excuse is that they worship, and they know that you don't worship the grave. They know for certain a Shia doesn't worship the grave. They know this. There's no doubt about this. The teachers I'm talking about, not the students that have no idea what's going on. Yet, eventually, they will find out and they'll decide which path they take. But the ones at the top, they know the truth. They know what's going on. Why? Because even when they give you the argument, when they say, oh, tasweer haram. Remember in the old days, when you used to get Hajj longer, they wouldn't let you use a camera. Back then, before smartphones, now everyone's got a phone. But back then, we used to take photos. They say, this is haram, you can't take a photo. And I used to always love this argument, because you used to always pull a note out of your pocket and you say, whose picture's on this note? Isn't that a photo? Your king? His picture there? Is your king doing haram? And then they say, he's a king, he's different. I go, show me in the Quran that he's different. Show me a hadith where the Prophet says you can take a photo of a king, but you can't take a photo of a civilian. Now, where do you come up with these arguments? And this same argument is used where they tell you you can't build above the graves, and they're building hotels above the Kaaba. The people go to Hajj. When they first built the Eye of Sauron, when you're doing the tawaf, if you notice, everyone's looking towards the eye. That's become the thing that sticks out. Before, you just didn't see this. But now everyone looks in that direction as they're doing the tawaf. It sticks out, it's just there. So that's allowed to be done, but the other one isn't. There is even a museum for Khalid ibn Abdul Aziz, you know that? There's a museum there for Al Saud, where it shows all their relics and all the things that they have. That even they say that a guy wanted to have children. So he wore the pants of Malik Abdul Aziz. Because Malik Abdul Aziz, they say, had a lot of children. So he wore his pants so he can get fertility and barakah to have children. I think he wore the pants for something else. I think he wanted to be fertilized. But anyway, Allah Azza wa Jal says to his Prophet, وَمَا أَنْتَ بِهَادِ الْعُمِي وَمَا أَنْتَ بِهَادِ الْعُمِي عَنْ ضَلَالَتِهِمْ إِن تُسْمِعُ إِلَّا مَنْ يُؤْمِنْ بِآيَاتِنَا فَهُمْ مُسْلِمُونَ. You can't guide those that are blind. With what? He says, away from the error. They can't see. He says, you will only make hear. Once again, we're talking about hearing. We're not talking about the hearing that we think of. This is where we're going to get to. You're not talking about the sight that you think of. You're not talking about the blood pump with the heart. Then he says, in تُسْمِعُ إِلَّا مَنْ يُؤْمِنْ بِآيَاتِنَا فَهُمْ مُسْلِمُونَ. The only ones that you'll make here are the ones that believe in our verses, that believe in our signs. And he says they are submitting to Allah. They are Muslims. They are the ones. This is the same with Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahy al Munkar. You know the rules for it. Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahy al Munkar. When I do Amr bil Ma'ruf, when I call people to good, I enjoin others to good, and I prohibit them from evil, who do I chase? I chase, even if I see 1% chance in someone, I keep working on them. If I see there's a chance, I can change. But there's people, I see no chance to change. That's it. I'm wasting my time. When I talk to them, I stop. But there's people you can see, there's a flicker. I keep working on them to bring them towards God. Allah Azza wa Jal is speaking about here the souls, the hearts of men. He says they are the deaf. Deaf as in they do not perceive. That their soul doesn't hear what you say. They are the blind, that they don't see the truth. They can't see it because they blind themselves. And then there are the dead. These are all, from all these three, are the same types that cannot be receptors of guidance. Allah Azza wa Jal says to his Prophet, وَإِن كَانَ كَبُرَ عَلَيْكَ إِعْرَاضُهُمْ. There he's saying to him, don't allow their evasion from the truth to be difficult upon you. You know, sometimes that's how you feel. He's telling his Prophet that. You know, sometimes you know, just like you're teaching your kid maths. You know, you're trying to teach him. You say, listen, if this plus this equals that, do you remember the one where, you know, you say if I have 2 apples and the ratio is 2 to 3 apples to pears. I have 2 apples and for every 2 apples I have 3 pears. Then you say to the kid, listen, what happens if I have 4 apples? And he says you have 3 pears. And you go, all right, we'll do this again. I have 2 apples, the ratio is 2 to 3. For every 2 apples, I have 3 pears. What if I have 4 apples? They say 3 pears. And you have to go over and over because they're set in the way that they're thinking until you can start to make them understand how the ratio works. So you eventually say, yes, I fix it, and they understand. However, if they're not a receptor, and you're working and you're never going to let them know and accept that the ratio is 2 to 3. For them, it's 3, even if there's 200 apples, there's always 3 pears. That's the way that they're thinking. They're the people you're trying to do. So when you're trying, they wouldn't even listen to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I will tell you something. I'm going to bring this in the easiest way that you can understand this. When Musa, Kalim Allah, the one that spoke to God without any proxy, when he saved, you imagine, I'll give you an idea. Imagine someone came with a staff. He's got a stick with him, and he says to the neocons, he says to the United States, he says, listen, I'm here to free the world from you. And with this staff, he frees the people from them. This would be something that would be mesmerizing. Why I use this as an example? Because Pharaoh was that big. He was the king of Upper and Lower Egypt. We're talking about the world's economy. He was in charge of all that. A man comes along with a staff and says, let my people go. Free my people. And he says, if you do not, the wrath of God will fall upon you. One after another, one after another. After all this, he leaves, and they've seen the signs. They saw the plagues, but they decide to follow him. Imagine, like, I want you to think about this. You've turned up, and for some unknown reason, the Red Sea is split. What, do you think there's a massive tidal wave that's sitting there? And you say, you know what? I'm going to follow these people. Like, really, what is functioning upstairs? And you follow, and eventually you drown. We don't stop there. This is the enemy. Whereas the people with Musa saw all this. And the second they got to the other side, they said, Ya Musa, make us an idol to worship like the Egyptians. That's the first thing that they wanted. They wanted to worship something else. So imagine these people were the believers. So how are you going to talk to someone that wants to wear a king's pants to have kids? How are you going to explain this to somebody? So anyway, this is what we're talking about. There being dead hearts and there being living hearts. And the ones that are living are the ones that are receptors. But what is a living heart? The living heart is the one we said that takes guidance. The first heart I need to work on is mine. I need to fix myself. I need to reform myself. Once I reform myself, then I'm able to reform others. But it begins on me making my heart into a living heart. How? Allah Azza wa Jal says in the Quran, إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ الَّذِينَ إِذَا ذُكِرَ اللَّهِ. That the believers are only those who, when Allah is mentioned, He says, وَجِلَتْ قُلُوبُهُمْ. Their hearts they tremble, they are fearful of their Lord. They're fearful of their judgment. And if someone says to them, خاف Allah, fear God, they freeze. Someone mentions Allah, Allah alaik. You're about to do something, someone says, Allah alaik. You hear the word Allah and you stop. That's how the believer is. As for the one with a dead heart, you say Allah. But like, Allah. He does not fear the position of Allah Azza wa Jal. He says, الَّذِينَ إِذَا ذُكِرَ اللَّهُ وَجِلَتْ قُلُوبُهُمْ وَإِذَا تُلِيَتْ عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتُهُ زَادَتْهُمْ إِيمَانًا وَعَلَىٰ رَبِّهِمْ يَتَوَكَّلُونَ. Firstly, the believer, when Allah is mentioned, they are fearful when they hear this. They know there's a stand on the Day of Judgment. Secondly, when they hear the signs or the verses of Allah Azza wa Jal, it says it increases in their faith. Not when you tell them something, but what is this you're saying? And then he says, وَعَلَىٰ رَبِّهِمْ يَتَوَكَّلُونَ. These people solely rely on Allah. Solely. You know when someone says, مَتِّكَلَ Allah wa alayk. كيف وين جبتها? That I'm relying on Allah on you. No, I rely solely on Allah. I don't say, yeah, I want you to help me. No, I rely solely on Allah Azza wa Jal. Allah is the one you rely upon. You don't just get someone. Who is this person you're talking to? Who is this individual? Another Joe Blow? You tell him, can you help me with this? No. My reliance is solely upon Allah. And if I think other than that, then I've deviated from the path. A believing heart, a contrite heart is a clean heart. So what makes a heart, what causes your heart to die? This is something I need to know. What will make my heart into a dead heart? Can my heart possibly become a dead heart? Yes. You need to be afraid of that. That sometimes when you see these Wahhabis walking, and you see them, they're walking one way, and they're not looking left or right, and they've got they're set on their ways, they're like a pre-programmed robot. At one stage, this person was a normal person, living like you were living, before he deadened his heart to get to this point. Firstly, it goes down to good actions and bad actions. Amir al-Mu'mineen, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi, says, مَا قَسَتِ الْقُلُوبِ إِلَّا لِكَثْرَةِ الذُّنُوبِ. You want to know what makes a heart hard? A lot of sins. When someone starts sinning and sinning, their heart becomes hardened. That's why it's a good term when they say a hardened criminal. When they say it, but it actually means their heart is hard. Really, that's what it should mean. Their heart has become so hard, they don't care. ثُمَّ قَسَتْ قُلُوبُكُمْ فَهِيَ كَالْحِجَارَةِ. That's what Allah says to Banu Israel. That your hearts have become as hard as stone. And then he says, أَوْ أَشَدُّ قَسْوَةً, which means, no, it's harder than a stone. Why? Because some stone springs have sprouted forth from them. That's what God says in the Quran. But your hearts are too hard. You sin, then you don't see what you're doing. This is why, have you seen a lot of these videos, going back to the issue of Palestine, so a lot of these videos where you see someone says, oh, we want to wipe them out. You know, it's like you listen to a Nazi. He says, you want to wipe them out because, there's no way he's going to grow up to become a terrorist, so just kill him while he's young. You sit there and you think, wow, there are actually people that think like this, just kill them while they're young. Think about it, that's the type of people you're dealing with. They actually think someone, and this is the same. When you take a look at the Wahhabi mentality, which is, this is inherited from these types of mentalities, from the Ka'b al-Ahbar mentality. The Wahhabi says the same thing. Do you remember the time when the war in Syria, when one of these Kuwaitis got up who's with the Wahhabi mentality, and he says, Ad'u Allah, he says, I pray to Allah, that He gives me 10 of the Shia, I'm an Asada, he says, of these Sayyids. So he knows what he wants to pick the most refined, the best he can find. Why? Because they know what this means. He goes, Hatta atamatta fi nahrihim. This is the words he used. So I can seek joy from what? Slaughtering them. Who talks like this? He says, atamatta, that I receive joy from this. I get pleasure from slaughtering them. If someone keeps sinning before they know it, this is what happens to them. عن أبي حمزة الثمالي, he mentions the narration عن إمام محمد الباقر صلوات الله وسلامه عليه, صلى على محمد وآل محمد. He mentions al-qulub thalatha, the hearts are three. He says there are three types of hearts. He says qalbun mankus. Okay, the first type of heart, you need to understand what it is. He says that this heart, he says, لا يعي شيئا من الخير. He says, وهو قلب الكافر. So the first type of heart is the one that does not perceive anything of good. And it is what? The heart of the kafir, the unbeliever. Once again, I'll always reiterate this. A kafir is someone that rejects, denies what is true. That knows haqq and rejects it. That's what a kafir is. He says, وَقَلْبٌ فِيهِ نُقْتَةٌ سَوْدَاء فَالْخَيْرُ وَالشَّرُّ فِيهِ يَعْتَلِجَانِ فأيهما كانت منه غلب عليه. So أيهما كانت منه غلب عليه. So the next one is the one with the black dot in it. It's a heart that has a black dot in it. And in it, he says this, like, if you want to look like, you would say there is a conflict of some sort within it between good and bad. You know, it moves one way or the other. Until he says, to see which one will overcome the other. And then finally he says, وَقَلْبٌ مَفْتُوحٌ, the one that is a receptor, the one that's open. He says, فِيهِ مَصَابِيحٌ, that it has, masabih has lanterns. تَزْهَرُ وَلَا يُطْفَأُ نُورُهُ, that these lanterns, these lights, they're illuminant. They have luminance and it does not turn out. إِلَى يَوْمِ الْقِيَامَةِ وَهُوَ قَلْبُ الْمُؤْمِنِ. Says the heart of the believer is the only heart that is a receptor. It's the only one that can accept. So the only way you're going to understand what we say, the only way Ahl al-Bayt alayhim salam, not me, طبعا, what Ahl al-Bayt are saying, the only way you can understand what they say is if your heart is that. It needs to be the heart of a believer. You need to remember, before I want to conclude with this, that the Imam, Salamullah alayh, Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, says, ما من شيء أفسد للقلب من خطيئة. So nothing is more corrupt or corrupting to the heart than a khati'ah, an error. Meaning he's talking about sin. Nothing destroys the heart more than sin. This is why when we tell people not to sin, the reason is because it will deviate you in the end. He says, إِنَّ الْقَلْبَ لَيُوَاقِعْ الْخَطِيئَةِ فَمَا تَزَالُ بِهِ حَتَّى تَغْلِبَ عَلَيْهِ فَيُصَيَّرَ أَعْلَاهَا أَسْفَلَهَا. So what happens is when you sin, it enters your heart, it will turn everything upside down. This is what we're saying. Everything will turn your life. What do I mean by this? And this is what I'm going to conclude. What does that mean? That everything will turn upside down. Have you ever met those people, they're religious and everything, and then one day they start questioning, why do you go to Hajj? You're saying this here? Ashubtu al-Hajj. Why do you need to go there? Or the ones, you've seen those people, why do you spend money to build the maqam? Where do these ideas come from? The guy goes to Phuket and that's okay. You know, he's all over Thailand, that's okay. God knows where he's been. Okay, it doesn't, you know, whether it's a hermaphrodite he's been seen, it doesn't matter. But his issue is, why is the shrine got gold on it? That's he can't sleep. You know, why has a shrine got gold in it? What makes them become like this? What makes them start to become a shakkik? You know, well, you know, when you tell you, well, oh, wallah takhanta bi Ali ibn Abi Talib. Well, you guys, whenever you talk about Amir al-Mu'minin, Fada'il Amir al-Mu'minin, tell him, brother, we don't even know what Amir al-Mu'minin is. Where he is, we don't know. We're not even understanding all the stuff you're saying. You're not understanding who Amir al-Mu'minin is, alayhi salam. But they sit there and say, where do you come up with these? What makes a person start arguing against Sha'a'ir Abu Abdullah al-Hussein? You know, why do you need to cry over Imam Hussein? Why do you need to beat yourself over Imam Hussein? What's the point? It's the sins. When their heart starts to become corrupt, then they become like this. And if you see, you sit down, some people even talk against Amati. Bro, Heather, he's for Mustashad Billah. Why is he fighting for? Why is he going to fight? You know, let them destroy. I've seen people talking like this about what's happening right now in Palestine. People actually say this. Why do they fight? I go, brother, it's not like this guy's going to work and says, stuff this, I'm going to throw my bag, I'm going to go to war. You're not understanding why, because the way you see it is, I remember this in an interview where they had Qanat al-Mustaqbal was doing an interview with Norman Finkelstein, and I was shocked. And she said, we shouldn't resist Israel. She actually said that, the because that's their stance, because they substitute. She said, and he says to her, and I love his response, this is an atheist Jew. He said to her, look, I accept. You have your right, I respect that you have a right to choose to walk on your knees. But he said, but how can I not respect the one that wants to die on his feet? Do you know, in other words, you want to crawl, you want to be abd, go for it. But how can I not respect the one that stands? And this is where they question. They will question every stance. They will question every stance from every individual, and everything got to do with right. Why? Because the khati'ah creeps into their heart. It blackens their heart, they stop seeing what's right. They start to see everything in the wrong way and not perceive. And their heart no longer becomes a receptor. And this is where it begins. It begins, we ask Allah Azza wa Jal to cleanse our heart from sin. We asked Allah in Shahr Ramadan. We said, oh Allah, do not let this night pass with us left with a sin. Allah is not only present in Shahr Ramadan. Allah is present all the time. Allah's mercy is not only present in Shahr Ramadan. It's present all the time. Allah is always, inna rahmatullah qareebun min al-muhsineen. Allah's mercy is close for those that do good. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal, you have come here to attend the center to commemorate the destruction of the most beloved of Allah's creation, Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad's graves. بحق الحسن المجتبى السبط صلوات الله وسلامه عليه، وبحق علي بن الحسين زين العابدين، وبحق محمد بن علي الباقر، وبحق جعفر بن محمد الصادق. I ask Allah in these four names that everyone that is present here tonight, that Allah Azza wa Jal cleanses their heart from sin, makes their heart cleanse in the name of these four, that they've come as a way to get closer to Allah through them. We ask Allah cleanses our hearts and purifies our hearts and makes our hearts receptors to what is right. We ask Allah to hasten the reappearance of our master الحجة ابن الحسن المهدي أرواحنا فداه. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم كن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. ولا أرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات ولا أرواح موتانا وموتاكم ولا روح الشيخ محمد كمال اللي توفى yesterday. وأسأل الله عز وجل to have mercy on him and all the believers. ورحم الله من قرأ سورة المباركة الفاتحة مسبوقة بالصلاة على محمد وآل محمد.